Are you going to apologize like Cory Booker
Apologize
has called
for what?
Cory Booker's called for it.
Cory should apologize. He knows better. There's not a racist bone in my body. I've been involved in civil rights my whole career. The blinders have been taken off. They've all of a sudden seen a hell of a lot clearer. They're seeing, geez, the reason I was able to stay sequestered in my home is because some black woman was able to stack the grocery shelf.
When may I expect dinner, Beulah?
Presently, Mr. Harris. Presently.
What would the noontime be without the classic Leave It to Beulah? Beulah, who's always in the kitchen,
But never seems to know what's cooking.
You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
The world is different. There's too much unfinished business for us to just look backwards. We have to look to the future.
I know Joe. We know Joe. But most importantly, Joe knows us.
that's right.
And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They'd look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap. Even call centers, was rushed overseas in the hundreds of thousands. How many times you get the call? I'd like to talk to you about your credit card. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. They're going to put you all back in chains.
In my opinion, we don't need white people leading the Democratic Party right now. The Democratic Party is diverse, and it should be reflected as so in our leadership.
But I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
Why does this happen? I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this, Chuck, I'm not going to do this because let me just be really clear. Vice President Biden absolutely has a respect level for all people around him, for voters across this country, young people, older voters, voters of color, black people, Latino voters, indigenous, Asian American, Pacific Islander. So I'm not going to even traffic in any hypothetical conversation about if he is sensitive enough.
In my opinion, we don't need white people leading the Democratic Party right now.
But I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
I think Joe Biden might be suffering from that same white entitlement and privilege and ego, where he's just that old school white male who feels like, hey, man, they need me, I don't need them, or I got them already.
Joe Biden is under fire this evening on comments he made about working alongside segregationist senators in the past.
Biden recalling his early Senate career, bringing up two segregationist senators, Herman Talmadge and James Eastland, who called African Americans an inferior race. I was in a caucus with James O. Eastland, Biden said. He never called me boy, he always called me son. At least there was some civility. We got things done. We didn't agree on much of anything. We got things done.
I think the two-party system, although my Democratic colleagues don't like me saying this, I think the two-party system is good for the South and good for the Negro, good for the black in the South. Other than the fact that they still call me boy, I think they've changed their mind a little bit.
And by the way, what you all know, but most people don't know, unlike the African American community, with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community.
It's that old school white male.
They're going to put you all back in chains.
30 seconds or less. What kind of a chance would a northeastern liberal like Joe Biden stand in the South if you were running in Democratic primaries against Southerners like Mark Warner and John Edwards?
Better than anybody else. And you don't know my state. My state was a slave state. My state is a border state. My state is the 8th largest black population in the country. My state is anything from a northeast liberal state.
It's that old school white male.
Choosing Joe to be my vice president was one of the best decisions I ever made.
Not the first sort of mainstream African American who was articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook, man.
My son is Attorney General a year in Iraq, came back, and that's one of the things that he finds was most in need. When he was over there in Iraq for a year, people would come to him and talk about what was happening to them at home in terms of foreclosures, in terms of bad loans that were these Shylocks who took advantage of these women and men. Back from Mumbai to go meet with President Xi in China, I stopped in Singapore to meet with a guy named Lee Kuan Yew, who most foreign policy experts around the world say is the wisest man in the Orient. There's not a racist bone in my body. But I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.